Start you off in Ontario, where thousands of education workers across the province were out of class and on the picket lines over failed contract talks.
That we want kids in class, the illegal strike is not fair, and frankly, we're not going to tolerate it.
The move has left hundreds of schools closed indefinitely, and it comes just a day after Ontario passed back-to-work legislation. Now, that legislation imposed a 4-year contract on education support workers, and it makes today's protests illegal. The legislation also invoked the notwithstanding clause to prevent any constitutional challenges. The union says the province's move goes beyond its tens of thousands of education workers.
You know, this is the first time in the history of the Canadian labour movement that the notwithstanding clause has been used to blow up collective bargaining and a bargaining table. It is a gross overreach of power. And I put to you that the people in our union, in this province, and even the country are not prepared to accept that. And so I think you're going to see a growing movement of support across the country and across the province of people standing up and saying, this government doesn't have a mandate for that, and we are not allowing this government to take away our constitutional rights with the swipe of a pen.
Mackenzie Irwin joins me now, employment lawyer. Mackenzie, thanks a lot for your time. I know you're probably perusing through all the documents here. Give me your sense here, I guess your analysis on what the government has imposed and what we're seeing the reaction is from CUPE workers.
So absolutely, yeah. I'm certainly not a constitutional lawyer, but there's certainly an argument on both sides here. So obviously, the provincial government has invoked the notwithstanding clause to protect students and to keep the kids in school, since they've been significantly affected by everything, especially over the pandemic. And then the CUPE side of it is that invoking this notwithstanding clause has really been, it's unprecedented, and it's supposed to be used in only the most exceptional of circumstances and only really as a last resort. Mm-hmm. And so instances when, for example, right now when collective bargaining is at an impasse, it's really not the type of circumstances that this clause was really meant for. And so there's great concern over that.
Yeah, and the government's use of it, as you mentioned there, was to keep the schools open, to keep kids in the schools. That clearly hasn't happened. We know that the workers are saying, you know, regardless of what happens here, now we're fighting and marching for workers' rights here, and we don't plan on going back. From a labor perspective, an employment perspective here, are there rules or laws that are being broken? I mean, there are, but looking at from the perspective from CUPE side, but also from the government side.
Yeah, so as I said, this is really an unprecedented situation. And so in invoking the notwithstanding clause, the government has effectively made this strike illegal, which is never really been done before. And so usually as part of the collective agreement process, there's rules and mechanisms for all of this and for operating, and we're really operating outside of this right now. Mm-hmm. And so the bill has put an end to that, and so any strikes are in fact illegal. And this is something that we're really navigating as is, because it's never really happened before.
How are you seeing this unfold now? We know a mediator was involved. I believe this was Thursday. Talks broke down. Both sides not being able to come to agreement. How do you foresee this unfolding here? Because clearly it looks like there's been a breaking point that regardless of whatever kind of legislation or action is imposed from the government's part, nobody is ready to go back to work.
No, and I think that there's a significant issue here in terms of, I mean, it doesn't seem like there's something that's going to be resolved quite quickly. So it's something that both sides have really dug in their heels and are now at a complete impasse. And so in terms of what we're seeing parents calling us, trying to figure out what their rights are in terms of their child care accommodation. And so many parents in the province, with their kids not in school, they're left without child care. And so it's a really messy situation. And it's really important that parents in Ontario know that their employers really do have a duty to accommodate their child care needs. and up to a point of undue hardship.
Right.
And that would require them to exhaust all options here. And so we know that this strike is temporary, and this situation really requires employees and employers to be flexible and to work with each other to find a solution that works for both the employers and the employees. So it may be a matter of employers really on a temporary basis accommodating their employees by either allowing them to work remotely, bring their kids to work flexible shifts. We're going to see a lot of that happening over the weekend while parents are scrambling, trying to figure out what to do come Monday morning.
Really quickly before I let you go, we are out of time, but I'm going to try and squeeze this in here. You mentioned there, and we've talked about how unprecedented this is, looking ahead to other issues, other disputes. We're seeing already now the secondary school teachers are looking at getting into contract talks. That starts next week. We know that I believe it's Go Transit, Metrolinx, workers as well. Talks have broken down there. When you're seeing sort of the bigger picture here of what's unfolded here to what that could mean for other negotiations regarding other unions, et cetera, what are you foreseeing?
Yeah, so the government invoking the notwithstanding clause is a very bold move. And so this is unprecedented, and it's something that it may impact how other negotiations go forward, and how people approach or come to the table, and the government comes to the table in those negotiations. And so it's going to be very important to keep an eye out and see what happens here, because we don't want to see a pattern where the government is just using this notwithstanding clause for situations that are not really the exceptional circumstances that it's meant for.
Yeah, and I know you can't talk to the constitutional side of it, but the argument is unconstitutional. Also a big concern over when we're talking about labor laws and workers' rights. Mackenzie, we're going to be following it really closely. Hope to have you back on again to talk more about it. Mackenzie Irwin is an employment lawyer. Thank you again for this.